don't have a lot of space on the cloud, and those recordings take up a lot.
Okay, it's the recording started. Welcome everyone to the North Santiam Sewer Authority Administrative Work Session. The date is 7/29/2022. It is 8:15 a.m. Welcome everybody. Quick roll call. Hold it. We got 1, 2, 3, 4.
No quorum yet, but we do have
Well, we have 4.
4 to discuss.
4 to discuss, 5 for quorum.
Okay. So, introduce yourself, starting with Denny.
Denny Nielsen with the city of Detroit, where I act as a counselor and in charge of the commercial rebuild for the city, as well as working on this activity and the visioning project for the Main Street in Detroit. And we just produced, along with Ken's help and many others, a new charter to be voted on in the November election. So busy times. And by the way, and I'm sorry, because I know you're just doing introductions, but so that you all know, we spoke about putting together a white paper so we're all speaking the same language and with the same tongue as we work within the public areas to promote and answer questions regarding NSSA. Along with that is a paper just entitled FAQs, which Sarah and I worked on for about a month and a half, and they're now on the drive. One is named white paper, the other one is FAQs. So no editorial pride. If you have any suggestions, I think both papers would be helped by being shorter rather than longer. So if you have editing skills that maintain the information, I would sure appreciate your help.
Will do. Thank you. Janet.
Good morning. My name is Janet Zionhall. I'm a counselor with Mill City. Been on this committee for a long time. Good morning.
Tim.
Good morning, Tim Kirsch, Mayor of Mill City.
I'm Ken Woodward. I'm chair for the NSSA, and I'm just a resident / property owner, and I represent the city of Detroit for the NSSA.
And Ken, I see that Brian has joined us.
Yeah, I don't see him in there yet, but I see his name there.
Yep. So he should have audio ability, just not
Okay.
camera.
I'm not quite sure. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yes.
My name is Brian Gander. I represent the city of Gates, and that's who I am.
And Brian Gander is the treasurer for the NSSA. And Larry, guess what? Your turn.
Hey, everybody. My name's Larry Rupp. I'm the new economic developer here at Marion County. I started about 2 weeks ago. I came from the private sector doing construction project management. And then I'm here working on this project and then also working on our capital projects like, the Opal Creek Trail and then also Detroit Marinas excavation.
Welcome aboard.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to be here. I'm loving the job so far.
It's a big project and it's moving forward slowly, but it's moving forward. I've been doing this since December of 2015. So that's how fast we're moving. All right, so everybody got the calendar. Did we leave anybody else? We all know Kelly.
Hello. I do want to talk a little bit about Larry, and I'm excited to have her here. I feel like it takes a little bit of explanation because you guys have been tossed around a little bit since Danielle, but in the next few months, Larry will be attending these meetings and then eventually be your primary contact for the county. I had originally thought that we would be hiring somebody who would be kind of more of our city liaison and working on some of our city projects. But then once we saw that Larry had such awesome, like, private construction, capital projects management, it was like, this makes sense for this role. So we're doing a little bit of shuffle in our office, and Larry will be taking on this role as well as others. So I wanted to make sure we started getting her in the loop. So this is her first meeting, and then she'll be at the board meeting on Monday.
Good. We will bring her up to date.
Yes, there's definitely a lot to read.
I got a big box. Big box. Well, just put it right back on Danielle's desk.
My desk now.
That's true. She's in the right same spot.
Yeah, just right there. And you can do whatever you want with it. Got lots of files. I sent you all the information for, you know, our passwords and whatnot, so you can go on and get set up on our Google Drive. So that's all good. So everybody got the calendar. So that's just,
Do you want me to share my screen and show things while you're talking?
yeah, go ahead. I've already put that in there to share.
Mhm.
Danny, while there's a sharing going on, thanks for putting together that cash card for Sarah. I appreciate you doing that.
So there is the calendar, and that's going to be really useful. Kelly put this together. So we'll discuss this at the August 1st meeting, but hopefully everybody has a copy of it.
I want to say, I know it looks like a lot, but all of our work sessions are pretty much if needed. So if there's instances where we don't need to hold a meeting, we don't necessarily have to have them, but at least we've had the time block.
Yes. No, it's going to be real helpful. Real helpful. All right, putting that aside, we're going to be talking about the North Santiam Sewer Authority financial policies. And now we'll turn it over to Brian and Janet.
Okay, so that is not the actual document that
Oh, sorry.
we should be looking at.
You want to tell me where to find it?
It's the one with the colors on it.
Right here, right there.
Thank you.
So Janet and I met about, is it a week ago, maybe 5 days? And what we basically talked about and what we will go over with the rest of the board is some of the, I can't really scroll through this. So some of the values that are highlighted in yellow in the areas. We'll just walk through it, and most of the values are related to, you know, when can the chair and the vice chair write a check without the board having to approve that check? And that's kind of getting towards that direction of, hey, we have a COG individual who might be doing contract work for us or stuff. So that's some of those values. You'll see those highlighted in yellow, and Janet and I will talk about those on Monday when the full board is available. And in the short run, you know, we also talked about, Janet has rightfully said, you know, this seems like a lot for the size of organization we are. And my comment is twofold. I think the county's going to expect a robust set of financial policy documents, not just a thin set. And it's also, we're going to be a growing organization. So it'll be easier for us in the long run to change existing language than it is to create new language from whole cloth. So what I've tried to do is look at a couple of different documents and and put together a broad spectrum of areas that our policies should cover. And Janet and I talked the other day about, okay, now we know there are, Mary from DEQ gave us some other organizations that are water, sanitation and stuff on the coast, that it might be time for us to reach out to them, see what's in their financial policies, and see if we have holes in ours, and bring them back, and as the committee work on them. So my request in the email that I sent the link out to the other board members is, please don't change the document, but please make comments about the document. So please don't write into them your ideas, but make comments on the side in the Google Docs that help us understand what our areas of concern for you, and what are areas, and I guess what are areas not of concern for you. I guess you wouldn't write that in, would you? But that's kind of where we're at right now.
Just to start out, I know this is an NSSA document, but you got gate sanitation in there. And I know it's not marked as a draft, but I know this is a draft.
That is because that's my comments. That's when I write a comment, that's the name that comes in as gate sanitation. So that means it equals me.
Okay.
So there shouldn't be any gate sanitation in the document proper. It's just my comments.
Okay.
That's why I wrote there on the first page, gate sanitation equals Brian Gander.
Thank you. My concern is, I'll share my concern, is that I think Janet should be included in check signing. I know that there are concerns, and there's, my concern is that Mill City City Hall will be setting aside a spot for us. My concern is a little lockbox for the checks. If somehow I'm not available or Tim's not available, then we have Janet and we have Brian that can sign checks. Reading this document, the amount to me as just starting out, 2,500 is, my opinion, is too high. I believe we should lower it. Once, just getting started.
Mhm.
To where, yes, the board, I think we have to show our communities also that we're being responsible, transparency. I think a limit of $500, 501, 750, something like that. It should be instead of 2,500. Setting up to where anybody that dealing with the checks, dealing with City Hall. I know myself going into Detroit City Hall, I can talk to them. I can ask them for assistance. But I'm not a counselor. So I would probably go through Denny. I know I represent the city, but I probably myself would go through Denny. Because to me, a counselor has more access to a city hall than an individual. I know I've been doing this since 2011 for Detroit, but that doesn't matter. It's not about me. It's about the respect for the city. Where I was going with that, I just think we're going to set everything up at Mill City. There should be a representative of the board that anybody that has to go to Mill City and deal with Mill City go through that representative. I guess that's the long trail. I finally got to the big sign, and my way of putting it.
And Ken,
Yeah,
I would feel more comfortable because as time goes on, we're all going to be dealing with, each other's cities. I wouldn't feel comfortable going to another one of the cities and saying, you need to do this for the board, or I need to have this done. I would rather work through Brian or Denny or Tony than do that, because for me, I would feel like I was invading. I would feel very uncomfortable with that.
I think it's protocol. I think it's proper procedure. I think it's respect. I think it's a lot of it.
Well, I think our actual center point is going to be with the COG. That employee is going to be the individual who, in essence, maybe should have more. Well, first of all, let's talk about the number of checks that we're going to write in the next 18 months. I would say it's less than a dozen.
Agree.
So most of those can be paid through electronic transfer using our bank account linked with PayPal. So that's basically a motion of the board that gives the treasurer the ability to initiate that payment. We don't have any, we may want to transfer some money to legal services to get that account up above the $1,900 that it's at right now. The board can discuss that. We have to pay COG, and we'll probably have to pay COG on some reoccurring basis for the staffing. But those can all be done electronically. So the use of those 100 physical checks that we just purchased is really going to be quite minimal when we have somebody else, to need to sign a check. It's mostly going to be minutes of the boards. And since we're having almost bi-weekly interactions as a board, where the lockbox sits with the check should probably be with what we would consider our administrative support, which is with the COG. Very centrally located in Salem. So that would be what I would discuss with the board on Monday.
But then that brings us to what is in here about being reimbursed for travel time, which if anybody has to run, I myself personally have never been reimbursed for anything that I've done in the years I've done this. I feel it's an investment, showing our communities that I'm willing to invest my time and personal cost, whatever it costs. I've been to conventions, different meetings. I don't feel that should be in there. And if you I understand putting it down at COG, but then we have the address at Mill City. I really believe the check should be in a small little box at Mill City, so they are there. Because as you said, we'll probably only be writing a dozen checks. We'll be making decisions at our monthly board meeting to pay certain bills, so the checks would be there. And if Janet's on there and you were on there, and Tim and I are on there, then we have all bases covered. And, but going back to putting them down at COG, then if somebody has to run down there, they're gonna want to be reimbursed. I understand that part for
I
my,
think there's two points about reimbursement, Ken, that you might be confusing. Reimbursement for board members would be approved by the board. If I wanted to go to a conference and I wanted to say, well, I'm glad to serve NSSA in that way, but I'd like NSSA to, pay for my hotel and pay for the conference. That's not what's been going on, as you said, right? People have just been doing it out of their willingness to serve, which is, I don't see that changing, but the board has changed quite a bit in the last 12 months. So maybe that will. The other reimbursement element is for employees. It's really for employees. And since we have an agreement with COG about travel time and all that stuff, that won't really matter. But if we want to send a COG, our employee, to a conference, then and use their own car to get there, and then we need to follow what I believe would be COG's policies on that. And so they may be seeking reimbursement from us for that, because that may not be covered in the contract we have with COG relative to our employee. So any distribution for reimbursements would have to be approved prior to those coming into fruition, right?
Brian, you also mentioned when we were talking about reimbursing that employee's mileage from Salem to places in the canyon. I'm concerned about that because they're going to be coming up here several days a week. And also McCrae, gosh, I don't know why I can't remember her name. McCrae was putting her duty station as both Salem and the canyon. So for me, working for a government agency, my duty station is my home, Salem and Portland. So if I have to go to Portland for a meeting, I don't get reimbursed for it because it's a duty station. So I guess as a government entity, if that type of policy would still be legitimate, and how that, if that should be in there or just taking that out, because I understand going to conferences and so forth, because that's going to be something the board says we need you to do. That's different. But the other, the other reimbursement, mileage reimbursement and stuff, I have concerns on.
Well, that would be in the employment contract with COG. That would override our policy that's in here. When we enter into an agreement with COG regarding this employee, then we should definitely have those things spelled out, Janet, just like you're saying. What's the workstation? When's the expectation for how many times a week they're going to be up in the canyon? What's their spot up in the canyon? Those are definite elements.
Do you
Thank
think
you.
that the sections underneath too, so A, B, C, are all things that could or should be included in either the employee's contract with the sewer authority or the COG contract with the sewer authority? Because I feel like it does confuse things a little to have it. It's like we're trying to do employment policies within the financial policies, which I know they're all interrelated, but it's like these are things that get addressed as particular employees.
Yeah, but Kelly, we don't have any other place where they're addressed. We don't have an
The
employee
COG contract is
handbook.
where it makes the most sense.
Right, so if we, and that's only for an employee that we hire.
Yeah.
Notice that up in 1, you know, it talks about the, in a contract that we've entered into, that's the priority.
Okay,
But if we had our own personnel handbook or we're writing our own contract for an individual, which may happen down the road, we would definitely want to have a personnel handbook that went through the evaluation
Yeah, then it could go-
protocol, human resources. Yeah, but they're in there right now
like, if we were
because,
if we were hiring somebody like directly through the sewer authority, these pieces would be included in our employee handbook and or that person's contract if they were a contracted employee.
exactly. But since we don't have any of that, and we might just want to show the county, hey, we're thinking of both contexts. We're not just thinking of if, you know, contracting through COG. But those are definitely points that are guiding us in reaching a contract with COG. If they weren't in our fiscal policies, we'd just be shooting off the top of our head. And the fiscal policies are a guidepost for the board when they're entering into contracts. Oh, what do we need to consider in that contract?
Okay.
I think we're getting way ahead of ourselves in some places. And
I'm concerned
Well, I
about
would say
duplicating work too.
we're well behind the curve right now, and we need to get way ahead of ourselves.
well, I know we've been working on this since March, and this is as far as we are, and it's a little nerving. And I don't want to rush through this.
And when you go back to B, it's important not just to read the numbers, but to read the full sentences. Okay, 2,500 without board approval, as long as the expenditure within the fund's approved budget expenditure limit. So that implies we have a budget. And the context for the budget has a plan. So yes, an individual can pay a contract as long as it's within the expended budget line and it's not exceeding the budget. So $2,500 is pretty customary. You know, 5,000 is the kind of the limit of capital outlay for items and stuff. And definitely the board, when it approves the budget, would have a context for putting that amount in the hands of the board chair, the vice chair, and the treasurer to make the distribution. It's not that the board chair or vice chair decide, oh, we're in the expenditure line, we can spend this. But, you know, think of it in a capital outlay context. You just had your board meeting on the first Monday of the month, and you aren't going to have one for another 3 weeks. And you just had a pump go out, and the pump needs to be replaced. And Mill City needs authority from NSSA to replace that pump. Mill City doesn't want to wait 3 weeks for a board meeting to purchase that pump.
Well,
They want to be able to do it.
I think we all know that you can have a telephone vote.
Well, yeah,
But it does mean special meetings and that you would be trying to compile a special meeting.
Right.
Do something pretty simple.
Giving notice.
Have to do that, you know, at least 24 hours notice and put together an agenda and get it out to the public because it is a meeting and it is a decision. If you have it in these policies, you're giving yourself the authority. But if you're uncomfortable, like making a decision or it's not in the budget, of course, we haven't created a budget, you can always and should always bring that to the board for a decision. So it's not saying that you have, like, if you come to a decision where it's like, it could be $3, but if you're not comfortable making that decision without the board and it's not been discussed and it's not in the budget, it should come to the board for discussion and decision. But this way, like with the 2,500, we'll use the COG as the great example. The main thing that you're going to be writing checks for next year is to the COG for your staff. I'm sure that's going to be at least $2,500 a month. So that means you're going to need to have a board approval every month for an invoice to the COG for your staff. Maybe that's not a big deal, but it's just another thing to coordinate.
And you probably won't even have to write a check. You
Yeah.
can submit, you can set up an ACH transfer
sorry.
into their account.
Brian, I just mean that pay. You know what I'm trying to say.
Right, no, I know. So it gets back to the point of where do these checks reside? Let technology be your friend. Let the board process be your approval protocol. And for the small number of distributions you're going to make out of your budget and the consistency of those distributions, it's not going to be to 9 different vendors.
We
It's going to be,
understand that.
You know,
so,
these are going to be flexible in the sense of we're going to have to keep revisiting these financial policies through the next few years as you grow as an organization. So if it makes you more comfortable, Ken, it's totally fine to put it at 500. You just have to recognize that it's going to create some inflexibility.
Right, and if you want that flexibility later, you know, as the budget gets developed, you know, and coded for certain things, you know, maybe, well, anything that's coded in this part of the budget, you know, doesn't need, can be approved at 15,000, like say, oh, replacement pumps or, you know, maintenance fees. But, you know, if it's coded in this kind of budget, you know, maybe travel reimbursement or something like that, conference reimbursement, then that needs to go to the board if for anything, you know, over $500 or whatever.
Good point, putting a limit on it. Good point. Thank you, Larry. We're just going to ask you what your opinion was on this document. I know I sent you both copies. Do you
and I
have,
think Janet and I looked through those items specifically the other day. And I took some notes and I was going to relay those at the full board meeting.
Yeah, I had given the suggestion of dropping it down to at least
500
until
and
we,
Yeah.
at least until we get to the point that we're doing more. I think we could pre-approve for the COG to be paid for the next 12 months, and we wouldn't have to do it at every meeting. So regular payments of XYZ for personnel, anything else we'd have to approve anyway. Just making sure that, you know, the checks as well as the electronic transfers go through the board for approval. And if something's done, it comes back to the board for their approval after the fact also.
Janet, do you want me to make the adjustments that you and I talked about before the Monday meeting, or just talk about them at the Monday meeting? I didn't want to confuse the document because I didn't know when people had gotten in and looked at it.
we're not confused. We're just concerned how lengthy this is. This is also, this document came from COG, I believe, and Danielle got a hold of it, made some changes, also some more notes.
Those are all of the green elements.
I think
I incorporated Danielle's notes in, the ones that I could read. There were a couple that I couldn't quite get to the gist of, but
I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, since this is really a COG document, and COG's been with us on this project for a long time. I think they might know us better than we do and might be able to go through this document. We're going to have our meeting Monday, and we can talk about, I'd like to see the changes that Janet has suggested. I'd like also to discuss this, but can COG really help us faster with all their expertise in the office? And maybe minimize this document for now for us and keep a file to where we could add to it later. I'm gonna ask Larry, have you seen, since we're in the first stages of receiving money, and this is kind of a turning point for the NSSA, have you ever seen a huge document in like this in the very beginning of something this, or an organization that is just getting started?
Yeah, I would say so. It depends. For something like this, it doesn't seem that huge. You know, a lot of times, you know, especially if it was built, like, I don't know if you guys drafted this from scratch or if you drafted it off someone else's model. Did you, like, you know?
The COG supplied us with a model, I think, what their financial policies were.
Yeah.
And then
And there
So
were,
Larry, COG is
redeveloping
another ORS 190 organization. And so we took their draft and their business manager told me, this is just a draft. We're still working on it. But so they sent it to us back in, I think back in January, she sent it to us. And, you know, part of the end part that has all the conflict of interest stuff should really be set out as a separate policy. It should really just be eliminated from the document
I agree.
and set out as a separate policy. But as a board, you know, we could agree to do that, and then we could just reference the conflict of interest policy within the organization, which we need one, right? And we should be following the ORS on it. I am firmly of the belief that we should not limit ourselves to the floor of being a 190 organization, but we should anticipate that we will probably evolve out of a 190 organization into what do you call it? I guess a regular government body.
Be some
That-
sort of district.
Right.
Whether
Right.
it's multiple
And
districts or just one with two parts, whatever, but
Exactly.
some sort of.
Exactly. And when we do that, we need to, you know, have a backbone that is strong enough to support that. We also are going to go out for grants.
We do have backbones. I think we really do. And we do have to set up a special district. That was one of the requirements, but right now, I think we're just tossing around, Mr. Gander, what we feel is simple instead of a long, drawn out document. And I think that you guys have put in some good work. You know, I appreciate it. And I'm sure everybody else does. I'll speak for myself, but I just like to see it simple.
Well, I don't think simple is going to work, to be honest with you, Ken, because
It's
we
not,
have timelines that we need to meet. And we have things that we need to move on from. So constantly revisiting the financial policies over time is going to distract us from the other objectives we need to meet. When we apply for grants, they're going to want to see that we have a set of fiscal policies that will service their grant well.
understand.
So, you know, my point is if it's good enough for COG, it should be good enough for the NSSA.
So maybe
If we want to eliminate out the conflict of interest policy and find our own policy on that, that would probably be a bona fide for us. We should do that.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brian, on that. I think the conflict of interest needs to be included in your board policies. Along,
Exactly.
like what's required of being on the board and the role of the sewer authority.
And that's being worked on also. It's already been approved, but we can also talk about that at a later meeting and a different work session about our procedures.
But you can't talk about your financial policies without talking about conflict of interest.
No,
It is the one area that will get board members in serious trouble. Council members, that needs to be approved and online somewhere. So if you want to strike those and create its own policy cluster, go for it. Great idea. But until then, they need to be someplace.
Well, the board will discuss that. Denny, what's your opinion?
Oh,
You're
Denny,
muted.
Muted, Denny. Denny, you're muted. Muted.
Now I'm unmuted, sorry.
There we go.
I've been in and out with my air conditioning fellow. I've got issues with one of my two conditioners. So anyway, I haven't heard a lot of this. I apologize.
So what have you read this? I'm
I
sure.
have.
And what's your opinion on any of it?
Well, I think it's a very robust financial policy set. I think it provides for anything we might want to do now and into the future in terms of both being an operational entity, or as I thought we discussed earlier on, that we're going to become a review and oversight board rather than an operational board. So I like everything Brian said about using technology as our friend. I don't write checks anymore. I mean, if I write 4 checks a year, that's a lot. Everything happens electronically. I think the levels, given the fact that there's going to be, and has been, and going to be a lot of eyes on all of this activity, I'm not concerned with anything from $500 to $2,500 in terms of the restricted amounts for payment without approval. And I think for me, as I read this, the one thing that I would like to discuss with the board is, what will our responsibilities as a board be? I don't think they're well defined right now, because we've sort of been in flux trying to consider the models that Brian brought to us, Brian Nicholas, that is, regarding our responsibility as a board and turning over operations to, let's just say, Gates and Mill City. And I don't know if that discussion would cause us to refine this document or not. Time will tell.
That's where I go back to, I wonder if, you know, we have our discussion going. It's great discussion, a lot of ideas, concerns, and maybe we'll bring it to the Monday meeting. We'll go over it, and maybe COG, and I use that word simple again. It's not as I use simple, and this is not simple, but maybe COG can help us out working on this document. I don't know.
I'd be glad to sit down with COG, but I think Janet's comment from the last meeting was, there are 2 organizations that we haven't spoken with yet, who seem to be 190s that are in our similar circumstance, farther down the road, obviously, but and maybe we should speak with them. So like this says on the first page, this is a living document. It's going to be refined. Remember, we have until December to have these in order. It would be nice to have something in place when we receive our distribution, so it tracks with our ability to work with COG and distribute our resources with COG. But the meat of this document still has some adjustment to go through.
Oh, yes.
So we'll get some contact information about those other organizations and see if they have a set of policies. And we can all, and you're right, going down to COG, seeing how far they've gotten in their policies since January and their development. You know, that would add additional information. So
And if I may for a minute. So one of my least favorite things in the world, in fact, I hate the most, is wordsmithing big documents, because everybody wants to try and do something for every little nuance within the document. So I really appreciate all the work that Janet and Brian are doing on this, obviously. As a living document, though, unlike your charter that you guys are getting ready to do in Gates, this is a living document that the board can change. So as we come up with little nuances throughout the next couple of years, we can address them, and we can change things within this document. The biggest thing is, I guess we want to have something, as Brian said, in place by December and not be working on this until December. I'm quite aware that this one coming forward right now is mostly for what we're doing now is just administrative stuff and oversight. In 2 years to 5 years, it's going to be more of a utility management, and the document might have to swing more towards that. So things like replacing pumps that cost not $5,000 but $15,000, things like that will be something more that we want to be ready to be able to take care of. But as far as I'm concerned, just dang near all of our expenses right now should easily be addressed and discussed at the board at any moment. And if one comes up that we doesn't fit into our time frame, then we can have a telephone kind of consensus to vote on it and then address it at the next meeting. And that might be where we change policy or something. But it just goes right over my head, because when I look at 12, 15 pages of these kind of documents, my head starts swimming after the third page.
sure, I think it's important to understand that, you know, there's a whole section of this document about budget development that will need to be fleshed out. There's pieces in here that can become their own separate policy, like the conflict of interest, and that reduces the document down significantly because there's some real specifics in that conflict of interest stuff. And so it has to be the size, my feeling is my opinion, it has to be the size that it is, because we don't have the other branches of policy within our organization to reference to in this context. So, you know, if there were an employee section that dealt with the reimbursements and such, that could be a one-liner in this policy. But in this case, we need to flesh it out because there's no other spot for that within our policies. So the other piece is, you know, some of the policy will be reduced when there is what we used to call an administrative rule behind it, which would be a structure on which the employees know how to function. It's not necessarily written into the, so fleshed out in the policy, but there's a procedural protocol behind the policy that our employees know how to use to carry out the day-to-day of our organization. So those are just pieces that aren't really in place yet. The last thing I would say, and I'm glad you brought this up, Tim, this document is still in committee. You know, so the manipulation of the actual document should be left to the committee. As we report to the board, then we take direction from the board and go back as a committee and manipulate the document based on comments we've heard from the board members. And I think that's an important part of committee work. It puts the responsibility to those who have been digging into the dirt and getting the reasoning behind the language that's in the policy. And then when the policy is fully matured and level, we present it to the board as this we think is the final version, and we're seeking your approval for this final version. And then any adjustments at that point, we move it out of the folder and into the administrative folder, and it becomes, you know, policy for our organization.
Doesn't it have to go through legal?
Legal.
Yeah, that would be part of the board's, the board would approve it.
Finalization.
We can't, as a committee, send it to legal without the board's approval.
But true, but
So the board would say, yes, you can now send this to legal.
we
We,
understand the process. It's just, it's the time it's taking to get to this point. Now, how long is it going to take to get to the next point? And then we got to allow enough time for legal to look at it. And all this has to be done before the end of the year.
yeah, I think we're fine time-wise. We've got
To
plenty
me,
of
as
time.
long as it doesn't give any individual or community more power than everybody else, so that it distributes it so that everything is a board decision, basically. I'm, you know, fairly confident that we can all work together, but if one person has too much say or one community has too much say, then that needs to be restructured. But
I agree with that. I agree with that completely.
I'm in the same boat as Tim. You know, we have standard operating procedure here. You know, we can pre-approve any expenses that we can anticipate over the next year, because it sounds like we have the costs anticipated. You know, and then after the budget gets developed, you know, we can say, put an appendix in there or write it into the language that says, you know, these are the budget categories that must be voted on by the board. But, you know, for now, you know, anything that's not pre-approved for the next year, you know, they will have to go to vote, you know, over $2,500 or whatever.
Exactly.
But otherwise, you know, as we do start coming into, you know, having to make big expenses and worry about the maintenance, we'll have a budget developed, it'll all be categorized, and then we can say, okay, anything that's in the maintenance category, you know, for stuff like, you know, like critical failure, who knows? I don't know, a pump goes out. That does not need to be, that's already pre-authorized to be spent by, you know, whoever's ready.
emergencies, yeah, come up.
Emergencies, yeah.
Sure.
If something falls under any of these budget codes in these categories, it's already pre-authorized, you know, to be paid. But if it falls in any of these budget categories, it must be pre-authorized by the board. And that's an appendix that we can add later, because, you know, this looks like robust financial policies, and I don't know if we need to, you know, we know where our touch points are, but I don't know if we need to like make sausage on every single one of them.
Right. Thank you. Well, we're getting close to our time, so I believe that the committee will be making the changes, bringing it to our August 1st meeting. I believe COG will be there as well, so they might have some input. That's a lot of work. We thank the committee, Brian and Janet, for all that you've done. Great job. Yeah, this is just our first discussion.
Tell me about it.
We're going to need to move forward on this. So, all right. Are we anything else to discuss?
Yeah, I want to bring up, just as an FYI, the contract with our new engineering firm, well, not new, is on the board's agenda for Wednesday. So it's official. Keller and Associates is the party that we're looking to contract with for the full project. So that'll go to the Board of Commissioners at their Wednesday meeting. So pay attention. Stay tuned.
Can we take the share screen down,
Oh, sure.
please? Aha, there we are.
So yeah, so the contract with Keller and Associates is on the board's agenda, so feel free to tune in on YouTube or however you come to the meeting if you really want to.
And that's when?
Wednesday at 9 a.m.
So I had a couple of, I requested an action item for the agenda. I've gone back through the summary notes and I cannot find a clear statement about the transfer of funds from the current Mill City account to US Bank. So we'll need to do a clear motion regarding that, so I can get those notes to Stacy and Stacy can cut a check. So we spoke about it. I think it's referenced, but it doesn't look like there's a clear motion within the notes. And then Tim, can you help me with when she does a check signing? Is it 72 hours before your board meeting or 20? She said she only cut some.
They cut
relative.
like twice a month is when they cut checks.
Okay.
Because I typically sign most of them at the meetings.
Okay.
Once in a while, we have, like say, an emergency expense or something that has to be handled right away, and we do similar to this. We do a quick board approval and do something, but it's out of the ordinary, I would say. And we just had our meeting here, so I would say if we do this motion stuff at our Monday meeting, should be plenty of time to get it to the first check release in our meeting here this next month.
Yeah,
Okay.
our first meeting is the 9th.
So
The second meeting is the 23rd.
Okay, and so once we get that motion, then I mean, it's not pressing that way. I know, Janet, you're pretty tied up, so I don't know how quickly you can turn around the summary notes so she could have a copy of it, but I sent McCray an email. Our only pending payment is an invoice to COG. And so I sent McCray an email, helping her understand that we have yet to receive the IGA transfer from Marion County, and we will pay the invoice by September 1, but we'll need a little more time. And in the interim, our box of checks should arrive. And if we need to do, I think with COG, since they're pretty patient with us, it might be a good method to try the PayPal approach. It just has to work with COG, if COG can receive payment. And maybe that's a good opportunity for me to go down and speak with their business manager and get her advice on the financial policies, at the same time.
Did you include the North San Am Sewer Gmail when you correspond with COG, with McCray?
Yes, and I copied you as well. So.
Thank you. So you need a motion. Well, we'll do that.
Just an action item on the agenda. I think what happened is it came up during a treasurer's report and it wasn't a separate item on the agenda. So.
Okay, we can add that to it. Time of meeting. Anything else? Boy, we're right on time today.
Means I got to go back to work.
All right, everybody. We know Tim has to go to work and we don't want to hold him up. And Denny, he's trying to stay cool as usual. Brian, thank you for everything. Janet, thank you for everything. I think if we meet with COG on the financial policy, it should be the committee or a couple of us to go over it. So anything else? Larry? Kelly?
It's real nice to meet everyone. I look forward to getting to know you all, and I can't wait to, come out and see you guys in your towns.
Yep. We'll be there.
Welcome aboard.
Thanks.
All right, everybody, this is the end of the work session. On July 29th, it is 9:15. Thank you, everybody, for your participation, and thank again the committee for doing all what they're doing. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. Thanks.
Have a
Thanks,
good
Ken.
day.
Stay
Thank
cool,
you.
everybody.
Have
It's
a
gonna be
good
hot
weekend.
one.
You as well. Janet,
Yes.
hang on there for a second. We're gonna make sure we do this correctly, so stop.
Okay, so if you stop recording,